Welcome to the 14th episode of Rivanna Review, a program of stories, features, and book reviews. My name is Robert Boucheron. I will be your host for a half hour of reading aloud with author photographs and illustrations. The print magazine Rivanna Review is published 4 times a year in Charlottesville, Virginia, on the Rivanna River. The magazine is available in bookstores on the Main Street Mall in Charlottesville and other bookstores in Virginia. You can order a copy or a subscription from the website, rivannareview.com. Contributors live all over the world, and they write about places far and wide. In this episode, we will visit Western Virginia for a pancake breakfast and rummage sale, literary life in London in 1824, an eccentric author in Germany in the 1790s, and Grand Caverns in the Shenandoah Valley today. Book reviews are of small press titles and authors you may not know about. In this episode, we will review 4 books of fiction: stories by Andrew Porter in Texas, stories by Chaitali Sen in Indians Living Abroad, a novel by Nina Schuyler on the downside of artificial intelligence, and Rachel Beanland's novel about the disastrous Richmond theater fire of 1811. Story, Never a Dull Moment by John-C. Huckle. Things got a little hectic around here, what with the Ruritan pancake breakfast scheduled on the very same day as the rummage sale over at the Holy Stone Temple, not to mention a custom knitting order I had to finish for Sue Ellen Carter to pick up on her weekly round, which normally would be a breeze, except I made a slight error on the sleeve length, and it's lucky I measured, because if there's one thing that sets Sue Ellen off like an incendiary device, it's a piecework supplier who fails to follow the customer's precise specifications. I had to rip out several rows of stitches because of the pattern, and wouldn't you know it, Trip Jr. picked that night to kick up a fuss at bedtime. So it was close to midnight by the time I fixed the sweater, which, if you ask me, was not one of Sue Ellen's more inspired designs. The next morning, I was so sleepy I filled Mr. Coffee with cold water and forgot to put ground beans in the paper frill that nests inside the drip basket, so all Mr. Coffee dripped was hot water that smelled agonizingly like a whiff of what I desperately needed to start the day with a smile. I let out a shriek, which I did not mean to, but at least I didn't curse in front of Trip Jr., who was slapping the tray of his high chair the way he does, like a drummer with no sense of rhythm. And he quit and stared at me in stark terror, and just at that moment, Mama walked in the kitchen door. She got that stern look on her face, like I was a bad mother who couldn't be trusted for 1 minute to care for an innocent baby. She said, "John-C, what are you doing to that poor child? You beg and plead with me to come babysit, and heaven knows I have plenty of important things to accomplish in the course of a day, and I drag myself in the pre-dawn twilight to this forsaken cabin in the woods, and when I set foot in the door, it's pandemonium." "Oh, Mama, it's nothing of the kind. I had a little accident, which we all do now and again, and I couldn't help but express my frustration, but I did not take the name of the Lord in vain, which is an improvement, you have to admit. Still, it scared the baby, so you arrived in the nick of time, because look at that toothless smile. He loves his grandma so much." Mama spoils the tyke rotten, which is the price you pay for free daycare. Without further ado, I ran out the door so I could go flip pancakes for hungry Ruritans and their friends, including out-of-town visitors, because the Spring Flip-Off is the big fundraiser for the whole year. They eat in shifts like a factory, which explains how you fit so many people in that pokey all-purpose hall, which, now that I think about it, does look like a factory, with concrete block walls and rows of fluorescent lights hanging over rows of plastic tables and folding chairs. Tamara Gainsworth made me volunteer for this event. She said, "Since you were not raised in an agricultural environment, you don't understand about getting up before daybreak and doing chores and going to bed with the sun. If a minor household setback makes you screech like an owl, then how would you deal with a real disaster?" That was her reaction to my tale of woe as we poured circles of batter on the hot griddle from 1-gallon plastic jugs already mixed in the wee hours of the night. Story, The Literary Life by Washington Irving, from Tales of a Traveler, 1824. Among other subjects of a traveler's curiosity, I had at one time a great craving after anecdotes of literary life, and being in London, one of the most noted places for the production of books, I was excessively anxious to know something of the animals which produced them. Chance fortunately threw me in the way of a literary man by the name of Buckthorne, an eccentric personage who had lived much in the metropolis and could give me the natural history of every odd animal to be met with in that wilderness of men. He readily imparted to me some useful hints upon the subject of my inquiry. Quote, "The literary world," said he, "is made up of little confederacies, each looking upon its own members as the lights of the universe, and all considering all others as mere transient meteors doomed soon to fall and be forgotten, while its own luminaries are to shine steadily on to immortality. And pray," said I, "how is a man to get a peep into those confederacies you speak of?" "I presume an intercourse with authors is a kind of intellectual exchange, where one must bring his commodities to barter and always give a quid pro quo." "Pooh, pooh, how you mistake," said Buckthorne, smiling. "You must never think to become popular among wits by shining. They go into society to shine themselves, not to admire the brilliancy of others. I once thought as you do, and never went into literary society without studying my part beforehand. The consequence was, I soon got the name of an intolerable proser, and should in a little while have been completely excommunicated, had I not changed my plan of operations. No, sir, no character succeeds so well among wits as that of a good listener. And if ever you are eloquent, let it be when tete-a-tete with an author, and then in praise of his own works, or what is nearly as acceptable, in disparagement of the works of his contemporaries. If he ever speaks favorably of the productions of a particular friend, dissent boldly from him, pronounce his friend to be a blockhead, never fear his being vexed. Much as people speak of the irritability of authors, I never found one to take offense at such contradictions. No, no, sir. Authors are particularly candid in admitting the faults of their friends. Indeed, I would advise you to be extremely sparing of remarks on all modern works, excepting to make sarcastic observations on the most distinguished writers of the day. Faith, said I, I'll praise none that have not been dead for at least half a century. Feature, Jean-Paul by Leonard Singletary. Jean-Paul was the pen name of Johann Paul Friedrich Richter, who lived in Germany from 1763 to 1825. He published at least 26 books of varied length and character. They include novels, literary criticism, satire, and commentary on events of the day. Though very popular in the 1790s and early 1800s, they fell from favor. They never found a place among the literary standards taught in German schools. And their perverse style, loaded with idioms, allusions, and puns, has inhibited translation into English. Sublunary Editions, a small press in Seattle, took on a mission to bring Jean-Paul to the American reading public. The Empyrean Catalog, their series of small red paperbacks, has 5 books by him, including new translations. One of the titles is Prefaces, a collection of Jean-Paul's prefaces to his books, a project as odd as they are. Biographical Recreations, another sublunary title, has a satirical appendix as long as the text. Maria Woods and 2 stories are pamphlet size. The opening of the first of the 2 stories, The Wondrous New Year's Eve Company, is a good elevator pitch for the whole lot. We have all read unsettling stories that charmed and frightened us with their lovely twists and turns, and that left us anxiously groping about for a bright exit until the unexpected line, "When I awoke," pulled the whole series of Warrens out from underfoot, unquote. Influenced by the satires of Jonathan Swift, Lawrence Sterne, and Tobias Smollett, Jean-Paul has always had admirers in the English-speaking world. Thomas Carlyle translated some of his work, and a Rhode Island poet, transcendentalist, and Unitarian pastor named Charles T. Brooks translated 3 long novels, The Invisible Lodge, Hesperus, and Titan. My introduction to Jean-Paul came by way of a book of essays by Hermann Hesse. He begins with a hypothetical question and answer. If asked, in what book of modern times does the German soul express itself most forcefully and characteristically, I would answer without hesitation, Jean-Paul's Flegeljahre, unfledged years. In the judgment of the better-read historians and scholars, he is considered an original, highly gifted, but chaotic and unbearably sentimental writer. If you contradict this judgment, you will be reminded of the oceans of tears wept in Jean-Paul's books, of the tumult and misery he depicts in men's souls, of the maiden figures he has created composed of cobwebs and moonlight, hypersensitive, moved to tears by nothing. All this is true, but above all, he loved the opposite, created the opposite. For Jean-Paul is not an intellectual or an emotionalist or a thinker or an intuitive or insensitive. He is all of these. Feature, Grand Caverns by Brent Howe. In 1804, on a farm in the Shenandoah River, a few miles from Harrisonburg, Virginia, a young man named Bernard Weyer thrust a spade into what he thought was a groundhog den. The earth collapsed into a much bigger hole, a subterranean fairyland of unbelievable beauty. 2 years later, Weyer's cave opened for tours, making it the oldest continually operating show cave in the United States. Our guide is BJ, a man about age 65 in a white polo shirt, hunting vest, and gray goatee. We walk single file through the cave on a path of crushed stone or stand in a clump in an open gallery. BJ rattles off scientific facts, historical data, and stories from memory. He comments on the veracity of the stories. He repeats comments made by previous visitors from around the world. He takes questions and parries smart remarks. You cannot get the better of BJ. The tour of Grand Caverns takes about 90 minutes. The route was widened in places with dynamite, steps are carved in the solid rock, and metal pipe handrails are attached to rock walls. In the 19th century, deposits of saltpeter, potassium nitrate, were mined for use in making gunpowder, as in other caves. Bat guano was mined for use as fertilizer, as it is rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These days, to preserve the cave, visitors bring nothing in and take nothing out. Strange shapes that took thousands of years to form are easily broken, as in a museum you must not touch. The oil from your fingers stops the process of crystallization, and the ecosystem of a cave is delicate. Remove a single organism, a cricket, a ghostly fungus, a white crayfish, and alter the balance for years to come. Electric lights are on, the bulbs hidden from view. Stapled to the cave wall, a bundle of electrical cables runs alongside the path. The lighting of the better stone formations is colorful and theatrical, more razzle-dazzle than strictly educational. In the 1800s, visitors carried candles, pine torches, magnesium flares, and lanterns. Permanent lighting was first installed in 1889. Photographs are allowed. The tour requires no awkward scrambling or dangerous open flames, but the cave is cold and damp. It maintains a constant temperature of 54 degrees Fahrenheit, and water drips more or less everywhere. The wet stone glistens and sparkles. Pools of still water reflect like mirrors. The stone formations are mainly white calcite, calcium carbonate, or limestone. The way they form is analogous to freezing. Calcite dissolves easily, flows underground through cracks and porous layers, and precipitates where it meets open air. Stalactites resemble icicles then. The sheet flows, rippling draperies and complex shapes recall coats of ice left by a winter storm near a lake or the sea. The most peculiar feature is the shield, a disk of limestone a few feet in diameter that projects from a wall or hangs in space. Grand Caverns has hundreds of shields, more than any other cave. The shields hang at all angles and from each other. Book review, The Disappeared by Andrew Porter. Andrew Porter's collection of stories, The Disappeared, is a rare thing, a book of fiction that is serious in intent and a pleasure to read. Porter published a book of stories, The Theory of Light and Matter, in 2008, and a novel, In Between Days, in 2013. He teaches fiction and writing and directs the creative writing program at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. 15 stories alternate between normal length and a few pages, with the title story placed at the end. In Argentina in the 1970s, Los Desaparecidos, the disappeared, were dissidents kidnapped by the regime and dropped from airplanes into the ocean. Porter's people move to another city, another job, another stage of life. They die in a way or literally, and everyone feels absent. Most of the stories are set in the present in Austin or San Antonio. Though he goes by different names, the narrator is indistinguishable from the author, a professional man in middle age, married with children, yet emotionally adrift. The Texas landscape is present, its hot and cold climate, trees like cottonwood, and flowers like bougainvillea. One long story titled Vines is about a talented young painter named Maya and her love affair with the narrator in San Antonio 20 years before. For no reason, they watch their landlord, a successful painter, carry on an affair with his model. Maya moves on to California and success in the art world, then dies of cancer at the age of 43. The narrator reflects on the life they shared as young people, a life that resembles, quote, an entire closet filled with things that I had no practical use for, things I had accumulated over the years but wasn't ready to part with yet. One of the things in this closet was a small painting by an ex-girlfriend, unquote. The story Austin has the same feeling of regret for a youth that has passed. At a party in Westlake Hills, the narrator steps outside and finds a group of old friends seated around a fire pit, drinking and smoking, quote, almost as if they had been frozen there in time, while I had been off somewhere else, getting married and having children and getting older, unquote. They discuss an ethical dilemma, the way college students talk late into the night, to no purpose, while the narrator slips away. At home, he finds a wife frightened by a noise in the yard. Quote, this was all part of the new world we had entered, this new dream we had begun to dream, unquote. A text from old friend Mitch interrupts. What happened to you, buddy? Where did you go? Book review, A New Race of Men from Heaven by Chaitali Sen. Chaitali Sen was born in India, brought to the United States at the age of 2, and raised in Philadelphia. She now lives in Austin, Texas with her family. A constant theme is Indians who live in America or England. They are Hindus of the educated class, doctors, engineers, a businessman, an accountant. Other characters who might belong to any ethnic group include the department secretary for 30 years at an unnamed college, parents of young twins, and a school teacher. All are polite, reasonable, and plausible, real Indians, and people you know. The immigrant is Dhruv, a young man who travels on business most of the time. He eats dinner alone in a, quote, faux French restaurant, unquote, where he watches an Asian couple argue in the parking lot, a woman alone at a table with a novel, and a little boy who wanders away from his family. He tries to write a letter to his parents in India. He wanted to write about a woman he loved, but he couldn't begin for many reasons. For one thing, she had not yet returned his feelings, and for another, she was Muslim, though not devout in the least. In fact, she was a heavy drinker. The little boy goes missing. Dhruv helps search for him, forgets what city he is in, and realizes he is equally lost. Uma is another immigrant, a woman in her 30s. We see her in Calcutta, married to a doctor who works in a clinic with his crusty father. They live together as an extended family until the young doctor abruptly dies. Childless, Uma has no reason to stay, and she goes to live with her married brother on Long Island, where she becomes a housekeeper and nanny to 2 boys. Uma is an unpaid servant, in effect, but she loves the children and adapts to her environment. It's a tender story with no overt message. It ends as Uma sings a Hindi song to her 3-year-old nephew in bed. The Catholics is about a lesbian professional couple near Ithaca, New York. Sharmila and Lori both work at Cornell University. They have renovated a house. In 2016, a young couple moves into the house next door. Quote, Catholic hipsters with 7 children going on 8. The father, Dave, was some kind of freelance computer guy and a drummer in a band. The mother, Kiki, was a long-limbed waif with a belly so swollen it was nauseating. They had their own live chickens and traveled in a school bus painted sky blue, unquote. A best friend gay couple visits from New York City. Kiki drops in and the Trump presidency hovers like background radiation. Book review, Afterword by Nina Schuyler. Set in the present in San Francisco with long flashbacks in Tokyo about 60 years ago, Nina Schuyler's novel Afterword is about artificial intelligence. AI, for short, is a computer robot that can think, reason, carry on a conversation, answer tough questions, and write prose as well as a human being. The heroine, Virginia, age 75, a genius and computer whiz, has created a digital simulation of Haru Fukumoto, a mathematics professor at Tokyo University. Much older than she, Haru was teenage Virginia's math tutor all those years ago. At a time when women were banned from universities and competitions, he launched her career, then died when hit by a car in the street in front of his apartment. Virginia has cherished his memory ever since. Meanwhile, she rose to the top of her field in the United States. In her lonely old age, she talks to the love of her life, who now lives in a large computer in a bedroom of her apartment. We listen to Virginia think, she reacts to events, and remembers her youth. That youth was hard. Her father, who was also a math whiz, made a fortune in Las Vegas, took the family to Tokyo, and abandoned his wife and 2 children there. Poor, humiliated, and socially stigmatized by divorce, Mother was bitter. She wanted her daughter to succeed where she had failed, and she mercilessly criticized the girl. Food ran short, and a bullying brother made life worse. Yet Virginia was not only smart, she was blonde and shapely, an exotic creature in Japan, and she spoke excellent Japanese. If Afterword sounds like a fable in which the beautiful heroine deals with adversity, that is no accident. A dialogue between Haru and Virginia discusses Frankenstein, the novel by Mary Shelley, and the monster in it. Schuyler wants us to consider the evil possibilities of AI. Virginia, delighted with her creation, has neglected to do this. In fact, she sold Haru in the form of a software license for $25 million to a Chinese corporation called Gillivable, which sounds like gullible. After she speaks at a San Francisco charity lunch, a human rights lawyer in the audience tells her the Chinese government is using Haru in an app called Best Friend to spy on its citizens in phone and internet messages and jail them for political dissent. Can Virginia alter the files that constitute Haru and change him back? Throughout, she is known as Mrs. Fukumoto, though she never married. She did get pregnant. Her furious mother arranged an abortion, and she never had a child. Afterword is science fiction, with coincidences and loose ends, but it stays exciting to the end. Book review, The House is on Fire by Rachel Beanland. On the night of December 26, 1811, the Richmond Theater near Capitol Square in Richmond, Virginia, was packed for a performance of The Father, or Family Feuds, a translation of a play by Denis Diderot, and a pantomime, Raymond and Agnes, or The Bleeding Nun. The State Assembly was in session. It was the height of the winter social season, and the audience included the political elite, the well-to-do, and up in the third-floor gallery, less affluent whites and black slaves. Performing was a troupe from Charleston headed by Alexander Placide. During the pantomime, a lighted chandelier on stage was hoisted into the fly space, which caught fire, hidden at first by the curtain. A member of the troupe shouted from the stage, "The house is on fire," and the building was quickly engulfed in flames. Many escaped through doors and windows, and injured survivors were taken to nearby houses, as Richmond had no hospital. 76 people died, making the fire the worst urban disaster in America up to that time. Over the ruins and unidentifiable bodies, the monumental church was built in 1814, a notable example of neoclassical architecture. Rachel Beanland chose the stage announcement as the title of her new historical novel, which sticks closely to what is known from documents and newspaper accounts. Beanland recreates the disaster in the opening pages, then follows 4 people who were at the fire through the next 3 days. Sally Campbell is a young white widow and a daughter of the famous patriot Patrick Henry. Gilbert Hunt is a black slave, a blacksmith by trade. Jack Gibson is a white stagehand, 14 years old. And Cecily Patterson is a young black slave who came with her mistress. Cecily, presumed dead, decides to make a run north for freedom. She wants to escape her abusive owner, a young man named Elliot Price, but she is afraid of reprisals against her family. Indeed, the theater troupe spreads a false report that blacks started the fire, prompting the slave patrol to seize about 30 black men and hold them in jail, the birdcage. Cecily's story is the most gripping of the 4 as she debates her choices, hides in a boathouse on the James River, secretly visits her mother, and enlists the aid of other black people. Beanland shows the brutality of the slave system and the cunning of those who endured it. As in Beanland's first novel, Florence Adler Swims Forever, the narrative is divided into short passages that switch from one character to another. The sweep is cinematic. Will there be a movie version?